What is going on, guys? Welcome back. Brian Moody, Jimmy Smith, our MMA show. We have an action-packed week coming up, starting with this Tito Ortiz, Alberto Del Rio preview, moving into a Anthony Joshua Ruiz 2 rematch, culminating, if you will, with a UFC DC preview and review of all those things. So, want to just say a special thanks. If you guys aren't familiar with the show outside of the podcast, Fight TV has been a sponsor with us really pretty much the whole time. And I was using Fight TV long before we approached them and they came on board with us. To me, when you're looking to buy a pay-per-view, not too many better options. They check all the boxes, easy to purchase, easy to watch, easy to stream to a device of your choice, and replay, very easy to access. That's what I look for. I don't like things to be complicated. I like things to be easy and streamlined, and they fit the bill all the way across the board. I say this to you because they are going to provide a free copy of the pay-per-view to one of you. All you have to do is listen to the Ruiz Joshua 2 preview, and we will probably have Jimmy give the code out during that podcast. You go over, follow the link we'll put down in the description, and you will be able to watch this card free of charge. Compliments of Fight TV. Appreciate them very much for everything they do for us. Now, Jimmy, with that out of the way, I am really surprised this fight is not more on the radar. If we just remove the names, right? And I told you, you've got 2 world champions from each sport. You've got 2 Mexican Americans, one born in Mexico, the other born in America, and they're latching onto their bloodline stories. Wouldn't you tell me this is a fight that you have to see?
Not a fight that you would have to see, but I agree with you that on paper it would get more press considering how big both guys were in their respective worlds. I will definitely give you that. Tito Ortiz, a household name basically, and then Alberto Rodriguez, Don Caras Jr., whatever you want to call him, huge in the world of professional wrestling. It is a little surprising. We've seen worse examples of this, meaning MMA fighters with less juice than Tito and professional wrestlers with less juice than Don Carlos Jr. have fights that were much bigger. So I'm not saying, boy, I can't believe you have to watch this, but that it isn't bigger, I do agree with you on that one.
Well, there's a couple storylines.
I'm common ground. You see, I'm your boy.
Yeah,
you see, I'm your boy. I'm trying to find common ground. You appreciate that?
I do.
I know
do.
You're a Colts fan. I'm a
together.
Steelers fan. We have our walls between us, but I'm doing what I can for you, buddy.
Yeah, we're tearing the wall down just slightly. And the wall, ironically enough, if you listen to the preview of these two, the wall brings up a whole different argument between Tito and Del Rio. But,
100%. 100%.
Yeah, I was a little surprised they went there, but listen, they went there. I think a little bit under the rug here is that Del Rio does own a portion of Combate America. And I say that because Tito, well known for his personal back and forth with Dana White. There was a time where Dana and Tito were going to fight each other. If you have a guy that's essentially fighting someone that owns part of the promotion, that's a pretty big deal too. And whether they are being open with that, but it's not getting traction because it's a big MMA and boxing weekend to begin with.
Yeah. All those things are working against it. Look, the issue too, which a lot of people will find surprising as you delve into this. Alberto Rodriguez 9-5 in MMA. It's not. People kind of assume that it's almost a CM Punk situation. It's his first fight. It's his second fight. He's diving into the deep end, main event against Tito Ortiz. What is he thinking? Sure, he hasn't fought anyone on the level of Tito Ortiz in terms of he fought Krokop, but that didn't work out well for him. That was early on in his career. This guy's a much more experienced mixed martial artist than a lot of wrestlers who come over. Brock Lesnar did a ton early on in his career with almost no experience, although he was an amateur wrestler, as was Alberto Rodriguez. So it's interesting, too, in that there's the misconception that Alberto Rodriguez doesn't have any MMA experience, that he's a wrestler just crossing over by himself. And that isn't true either.
No, I agree. He doesn't have the Shamrock name, the Lesnar name. But again, he's not following that mold of wrestling to MMA transition. He actually went MMA to wrestling and now comes back. And one of the other things that I just want to touch on here, because you did mention it briefly, there's a lot of layoff here, okay, for Alberto Del Rio. But to me, you also have to look at the layoffs that Tito has had with his opponents. 8 years for Chuck, 4 years for Chael, 2 years for Bonner. So, I mean, if we're going back to 2010, since that's when we last saw, words are tough, Alberto Del Rio in an MMA fight, to me, you're looking at Tito 2-5, wins over Bader and Shemenko. I think his last notable win, you'd really have to go back to 2006, would be Ken Shamrock. I mean, I say that because there's a huge difference between you're in shape, and let's just be honest, Tito always looks in great. Both of these guys look in good shape. There's a difference, though, between being in shape and I've been in camp for fights. And I think Tito kind of benefits from the MMA experience that he has. But I think a lot of people discredit. You look back at the last few opponents, man, there's 15 years in those three names of layoffs on guys that he's fought. And I just don't think that's getting the attention that it deserves.
Here's an interesting thing about Tito. Now, I've known Tito in a lot of different capacities. His was the first team I started out with in MMA and Jiu-Jitsu, Team Punishment, Huntington Beach, in like 2000. That's where I started. I knew him as I commentated his fights, and I knew him as a commentator when we worked together at Affliction. So I've known Tito in a lot of different capacities. So one of the things that is his strength and his weakness, right? One of the knocks Chuck Liddell always had on Tito is, he talked about the Frank Shamrock fight when he tapped his strikes, right? Who the hell taps his strikes? That's you're a chicken, a coward, and all this stuff. Even when Tito would lose, and in his prime, he didn't lose that often, but when he would lose, it was generally, even if it was a TKO, it wasn't the eyes wide shut, oh crap, this looks really bad, this is going to take years off of his career. He didn't eat a lot of those kind of knockouts. He just didn't. If you remember the Rashad Evans knockout, it was basically to the body. That's what did it. Same thing with Nogueira. Chuck Liddell knocked him out, but he was still aware and conscious. He didn't knock him clean out. Chuck Liddell had the kind of knockouts where you went, oh my God, is this guy going to be okay? Just flat, eyes wide shut. Man, there's a big problem here. Tito didn't have those. And that was always kind of a knock on him, that he didn't have heart or guts or any of that stuff. But he also didn't take the beatings that a lot of fighters took in losses. He took some work to the body, stuff like that. Not the scary knockouts in his losses. That's very important.
The other side of that is, we don't have a lot of recent on Del Rio, as you said. But from what I've seen, okay, obviously he got to pick his opponent. He could have picked whoever he wanted. He seems... poor choice of words here, perhaps, but smitten with Tito. He did, from what I can see, do all the right things as far as he left home to go to camp. I believe he's going to be a larger fight. It's an odd fight at 210 pounds. Even though he hasn't had that meaningful competition, he's also training with, since we did mention him earlier, even though the loss there, Ryan Bader has been working with him. It's just, there is a big bridge to gap, but I think people are making that bridge much larger when they're taking what's happening here and they're trying to compartmentalize this as another CM Punk situation. I just don't think it's going to be anywhere near that. I understand that at face value, yes, Tito Ortiz should win every single position of this fight. You can't make that type of ground up. But I feel like this is going to be a far closer fight than people actually want to give it credit for. In fact, some people think this isn't even a fight, that it's just going to be a work.
As the owner of a promotion, which Del Rio is, and I've said this quite a few times when stuff like this has come up, about a fight being a work, or this is fixed, or this, and that. That is the biggest risk in the world, is fixing a fight. Because if it gets out, you are done. Not only will you never promote again, that's fraud. There can be criminal penalties for this kind of thing. You can do time for this. It's illegal to fix a professional athletic competition. So, and that's one of the lines between WWE and professional sports, is they're legally different categories. Legally, you cannot predetermine the end of a legit athletic competition. So, as the owner, he would know how phenomenally stupid that is. Now, where it might come up is Tito Ortiz, crazy pressure, still good ground and pound, still big, still strong. He has a style that ages very, very well. He never really relied on his speed and his I mean, he's a good athlete, but not the kind of athleticism that doesn't age well, right? If Del Rio is in a tough position and he's getting hammered and things aren't going well for him, might we see a quick tap? Maybe. That might be an issue. I don't have to take these elbows. I've already made my money. That would be an issue. And if Del Rio has any sense of how this fight is viewed and how he is viewed, he can't let that happen. He's got to take the beating in order to make it not look like what a lot of people have talked about. Oh, this might be a work. No, he's got to take the beating. We got to see some blood if he's going to get a TKO loss.
Jimmy, we've got to see some blood, Smith. I like it. I exactly see what you're saying.
It's true. Yeah, he can't live with that possibility that, oh man, everyone's going to think this is a work. You got to take your ass whooping. You got to take it. You cannot have a quick tap in this.
I hate to even venture down this Elite XC road, but as you mentioned, in a way, you can't get away from it. And I guess we can transition just a bit there. The last time, obviously, I just want to say the last Tito fight, Tito Chuck 3, was probably the least enjoyable fight I've ever seen. I never, ever want to see something like that again. It was not even, as a fan, something that you could look back on with any type of fondness. There's a lot of things that contributed to that. Very little of which I think, for the record, go into this fight. But at the same time, you have to look at what Tito's doing. And, he goes out to Golden Boy and he sings this big song and they collapse. And now we're looking at Combate, which, from what I've read, there is a 3-year fight agreement here. Don't you kind of have to wonder what Tito's doing with his career and what he's doing with his legacy, going to all these lesser known or even entry level MMA organizations and almost using his name to a degree to bring relevance to them? I mean, don't get me wrong. Chuck was a big part of the last fight. Of course, we all know that, but Chuck and Tito sold that fight. In this fight, Tito is probably going to sell it more than Alberto Del Rio will. I understand the wrestling versus MMA, culture and whose side are you on stance that they're taking in promoting this. But what is Tito really gaining from all of this?
It's a victory lap. These are all incredibly winnable fights. Chael Sonnen, Chuck Liddell, Alberto Del Rio are winnable fights with big paydays. Does he need the money? No, but to quote a great movie, I don't need it, but I like it. It's pretty simple. Tito Ortiz has put in the years and had the tough fights and been in the big promotions long enough to have a victory lap in mid-level promotions to make some money. And it's hard to believe that's not exactly what he's doing. You can be cynical about it if you want, but Tito put in the years. He put money in the bank in terms of his name value, and now he's withdrawing that money. He's using that name value to build up these promotions that need the boost and will pay him for it. I don't begrudge him that. I don't begrudge him that at all.
Well, we started this by looking at a way this was a very, very relatable fight from a competition standpoint. I want to cap it with a childhood way to relate to it. We obviously have talked about in prior podcasts and shows, we both grew up with a much different wrestling product than there is today, but we've seen the evolution of wrestling and fighting to the point where you always dreamed of winning that WWE or WWF, whatever championship belt, looking at all these, iconic fighters and wrestlers hold those titles. This is going to be an extremely rare situation. I can't actually remember any other time where, unsanctioned, of course, but a UFC belt and a WWF belt are going to be on the line. And there is a personal pride associated with that for both of these men to hold a title from another organization on their wall, just as there would be any person that watches this, that immediate connection to, hey, when I was a kid, I wanted to have that WWE championship belt or that WWF belt. As a man, maybe that you don't have the skill set to go achieve a UFC championship, but it's something that I think anyone that grew up looking at wrestling or later in life turned to MMA can easily relate to.
Two things I want to say. First off, I love the NWA belt when I was a kid, and the AWA one. Remember how gigantic that thing was? The
Yes.
AWA belt. Yeah. But I remember the green Intercontinental belt for the WWF.
I do.
Remember when it was green?
The green
Tito
one?
Santana, Greg the Hammer Valentine, those days.
Yes,
it was like green.
I like the yellow one. The Ultimate Warrior had a yellow one that he wore.
The yellow one, yeah.
I really like the white.
Hennig held it for a long time.
The white Intercontinental Championship belt. That's probably one of my favorite belts of all time. The white belt with the gold plates, beautiful.
Yeah. I'm really surprised there weren't lawsuits on some end by the WWE or the UFC implying that championship is on the line. They physically own it. It's Tito's. He owns it. He owns the belt. But the idea that I can give it to someone else based on their in-ring performance implies I'm passing on the UFC title. I'm just a little surprised, and the same thing for the WWE. I'm a little surprised there wasn't at least an attempt at a cease and desist. You know what I mean? Even if you're not going to win it in court, just to say, hey, you can't imply that our championship, which is not associated with this, is on the line in this event. Are you a little surprised that they're two organizations that are known for their ability to litigate and being protective of their brands, the WWE and the UFC, that neither one of them would send a letter saying, hey, don't do that?
I was,
or maybe they did and just didn't get out.
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe that letter's in the mail as we speak. At the same time, though, two things really struck me with that. Is number one, it seemed in listening to the interviews regarding this like such a jovial, spur of the moment, hey, let's exchange belts when this is all over to the winner thing. And two, I don't think they care. I don't think this is even on their radar yet. Yeah, maybe it will be afterwards, but again, I mean, this is a very, very minute event for the weekend, and I just don't know. I guess it's a double-edged sword. In one case, you really can't say the UFC and the WWE don't know all and all because they're just that large. They pay people to monitor this stuff 24/7. But yeah, no, I did think it was a little bit strange, but it was a weird way to bring attention to the fight, but it's also a very relevant way. Like I said, it's a very relatable way. And I wouldn't lie to you. I think it's actually kind of cool. I mean, whether or not they double belt somebody at the end of this thing, I don't know. But to see a UFC title change hands outside of the UFC, if that happens, would be kind of a really weird moment in MMA.
Also, it could be they didn't want to draw attention to the event, because that would be a nice headline if you're Combate. UFC sues to keep this from happening. Just that they pay enough attention to us that they thought we were a threat and all. Like, you know what I mean? They'd try and play that up and it'd be a good headline. So it could be they just didn't want that either.
Yeah, that's very true. There was a promoter, his name escapes me at the time, but in the early days of wrestling, he would come up with names that were just a little bit off from a famous wrestler's name and then draw with them. So he would have like Bruno San Martino, and he was well known for this, where, you would hear the name.
Superstar Billy Fram,
yes,
stuff like that.
You would hear the name and you would go to the venue and then you would realize, oh, that's not who I'm here to see at all. And, really did a great job of exposing the business in a way that will never, ever happen again because of, just as you said, litigations, lawsuits, cease and desist. I mean, could you imagine if someone right now were to start a wrestling organization and have, Hacho Man, Randy Savage, and, Hulk Hogan? It just isn't going to happen. But
I'd go. I'd go see that. I'm not even going to. I haven't been to a wrestling event since I was 9, and I would go see that.
It does take that little bit of a path, though, with those belts.
Chutzpah, we would say. Yes.
Yeah, so it's going to be an interesting event. Again, we can't thank Fight TV enough for helping us and obviously letting one of you guys watch the show. We appreciate all the support that you give us. And again, we will be back tomorrow with more than one episode of our MMA show. Until then, appreciate you checking this out. We will be back very shortly with more commentary.